second graders. I wanted to talk today about severe weather. I already did a video showing severe weather out of chapter 3 in our weather book. So we talked about what severe weather is, tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, not around here, but in some areas of the country, hurricanes. So we're going to talk more about tornadoes because I was actually in an F5 tornado when I was 13 years old. It was in 1974. I was in 8th grade. It was April 3rd. It had been the warmest day that we'd had so far that spring. I remember that I wore shorts and I was having some fun with my close friend, my best friend, who is still my best friend today after all these years. She lived down the street and we were playing together, and I had come home for dinner. Luckily my dad was home from work, my mom was fixing dinner, and they came on the weather, interrupted the news program or whatever program it was, and said that there was a tornado that was going to come to our subdivision and that we needed to take cover. There were no tornado sirens back then. If you weren't watching that particular TV station, you had no warning. It really had not started to rain or any thunderstorm or anything like that. So when that came on the TV, my dad was watching TV and he said, there's a tornado coming near us. Because they mentioned our subdivision. It's called the Arrowhead subdivision. If you Google Xenia tornado, you will see a whole bunch of things and they'll mention the Arrowhead subdivision. So my dad went and looked out back, and literally you could see a massive, massive, massive black cloud. I'm going to show you some pictures of what it looked like to me. Because obviously when he went outside, he said, wow, I think that's it. It did not look like a funnel cloud. It was just this huge, huge, it took up all the sky, this black cloud. So of course, my sister, who was 9 years old, she was in 4th grade, I was in 8th grade, we decided to get a better look, and we climbed our backyard tree to see it better. And oh my goodness, that was a bad, bad move, boys and girls. My father was not happy. My mother was not happy. They were yelling at us, really mean. Get out of the tree. You're going to be in biggest trouble ever. So of course we did. And thank goodness my parents knew what to do. Our house did not have a basement. My mother still lives there, actually. Does not have a basement. So they had, my father and I went into an interior closet, and my sister and my mother went into another interior closet. That means, you know, it's inside the middle of the house. It's not towards the outside. So I was thinking, yeah, okay, this is messing up my Brady Bunch. Anybody who's ever watched Brady Bunch, I think that was on TV, and I was very upset because I wanted to watch my show. During, when it started to hit, the wind did pick up. We have an attached garage, so that means our garage is attached directly to the house. The door to that attached garage blew open, and when the wind started, you could hear kind of wind. My dad went out of the closet to close it, and I'm, of course, you know, went out of the closet too. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I looked out the front window. Our neighbor across the street had a metal awning, like an aluminum awning over their front porch, and I saw the awning go together like a piece of tin foil, like a piece of aluminum foil, and it went straight up in the air. And at that point, I kind of got the idea that this was no joke. This was absolutely no joke. We went back in the closet. Anything that you hear about tornadoes kind of wanting to suck you out is true. My father held on to the doorknob, and I held on to his bicep, and it was flexed to the max. It does sound like a train. I'm going to include a video of an audio that was shot by a guy that had a camera, because we didn't have video cameras back then. We didn't have cell phones, none of that stuff. You had these 8mm cameras you could use. And so I'm going to include that so you can hear what it sounds like. It does sound like a train. It was really loud. You could hear things breaking. It hit towards the back of our house, which we have a sliding glass door. That was our patio door. And my mom and dad's bedroom was back there, had a window. So you could hear all this glass breaking. You could hear all this stuff coming into the house. Just lots and lots of noise of things busting together and stuff like that, plus the train sound. I don't know how long it lasted for sure. I'm sure you could look it up and see, but it seemed pretty quick, like maybe just a minute, 2 minutes tops. So our house was standing, thank goodness. When we came out of the closet and my mom and my sister came out of the closet, I found out what they had to do is my mom and sister actually stood up. My mom is only like 5'3", where I'm a lot taller than my mom. Even at that point, I was taller than my mom. And my sister, like I said, was in 4th grade, so she wasn't very big. My mom had to hold the door shut and stand, and my sister had her arms around my mom's waist behind her, and that's how they held the door closed when the whole thing was going on. We just looked around, and like I said, our house was still standing. Everything was busted out of the back, and pieces of wood, pieces of aluminum, siding, garbage, dirt, lots of tree branches were all blown in our house, which the back patio, you had the kitchen area, and then you had the living room. It's kind of like an open concept. Was all in the back of the house, was all blown into the living room, dining room area. Just everything was a huge mess. We looked out the front window, and my sister's best friend lived across the street. Their house was completely flattened, and she really went hysterical about that. Now, fortunately, we watched them because we went outside and things were all over the place. They actually climbed out of about an 18-inch cross thing where parts of the house, the beams had fallen like this, and they crawled out from there, and there was 5 of them, the mom and the dad and 3 kids, and they were all fine. It was amazing. It was just amazing. I didn't know anybody that was hurt. In our area, right where we were, everybody came out of their house unbelievably, because our house and our next door neighbor's house was the only houses on our street, which we had a pretty big, probably 25 houses that went down this long street, that were not completely destroyed. And you'll look at the pictures. It's just unbelievable. It's like bombs went off on all these houses. So everybody kind of, just wandered around outside like, what are you going to do? I will tell you, I'm going to show you a picture of the bravest boy I know. He was in 8th grade with me, and he was home by himself. His parents were at work, so he heard the wind coming and all that. He did not know what to do. He went under his bed. Bad. But I will tell you, we didn't have any kind of information. No one talked about what to do in a tornado. No one really even mentioned it before the big one hit Xenia, Ohio in 1974. No one had ever prepared. We didn't even do tornado drills. We did fire drills, but we never did a tornado drill at my school before this. And so he went on, his name is Terry, he went under the bed, and his house did collapse, but thank goodness he was fine. And he was wandering around. We were just kind of staring at each other, and I just couldn't believe he was home by himself, because, I was home with my parents and still scared to death. My dad didn't know what to do either, so he went and got some 2-liter thing of Pepsi and some cups and started serving Pepsi to everybody, and we're just drinking this Pepsi, staring around. We did find out later that the door to the garage that my dad had closed, thank goodness it opened again, and there is access to the attic in the garage. What was happening to our house, there was nails sticking around the ceiling, the edges of the ceiling in the whole house, sticking down about that much, and our house was going to start to implode. That means instead of going this way, it was doing this way, and that's what a lot of houses did. They collapsed on themselves. Rather than explode, they imploded. So our house was starting to do that. That's what the roof was coming down, but the door blew open again, thank goodness, and it relieved the pressure. And so that's why our house was still standing. We did have to move out. It was not livable to be in there. So we moved out for a while it was getting fixed. So we were standing outside back to the whole day, and it happened at 4:40. So school was out. Like I said, my dad was home. Some parents were not home yet because it was, it was before 5. It did kind of start to rain a little bit, but not much. So we really, really didn't have a big, like thunderstorm, rain, anything. It was really just a wind event, a huge one. There were power lines down. We had no electricity in our homes. We had no telephone that would work. Nothing like that. Lots of cars were just destroyed. So we stood around there for a while, just kind of thinking, what do we do next? My mom's best friend and one of my best friends also lived down the street and around the corner, so you couldn't see their house. But all of our street, like I said, was destroyed. So my mom wanted to go check on them. So we walked down the street, and we had to be really careful because there were live power lines that we could have got electrocuted. And we got to their house, and their house was completely flat. They went in the hallway is where they went. Thank goodness they were all fine, but everything was just destroyed. So what they'd done is they'd laid out a blanket, and my friend, then there was a boy, Scotty, and Sandy was my friend, and the mom was home. The dad was at work yet. So my mom and dad started helping her salvage whatever she could. My sister started helping the younger boy, and I helped my friend Sandy. So we're kind of trying to see what does she have in her room, because that's our stuff. You're worried about your things. And just try to find her stereo or her record player. Yeah, we only had records. We did not have CDs and anything else. We had record players. So we've salvaged some things we could get, and it started to rain. So we had each pile for the family, so we put a blanket over it. My mom said, you know what, our car is still intact. We can't stay here, none of us could. So we actually, she sent my dad and I back to our house to get the car and bring it here if we could get through. People were trying to move things so the roads you could get through. So my dad and I walked back to our house, and he says, we need to board up this back window and this back patio. So we got some wood, and I was helping him hold it. When we heard a megaphone, if you know what that is, that's like where it goes, hello, hello, like that. So there was a pickup truck driving around saying, they were saying, another tornado is coming, take cover immediately. Another tornado is coming, take cover. And they were driving around saying that. And my dad went, go get your mom and your sister. And I went, okay. And so I ran up the street and turned the corner to find my mom and my sister and the other family were in the back of another pickup truck, and they were going to take them to a shelter. And my mom, like I said, is not very big. So she's yelling, that's my daughter, stop the truck, stop the truck. And I got close to the truck, and they were still moving. At least my mom and I remember it this way. Everybody in our family remembers it this way. And she grabbed the back of my shirt like this. I was probably at least this much bigger than her, and even I weighed more than her, I betcha. And she hauled me into the back of that truck. How she did that, I have no idea. But she did. And I said, what about Dad? She goes, Dad will figure it out. And they took us to a church that had not been destroyed. We waited at the church for a while. No tornado ever came. So it did not happen. I think they were, they thought one, but they didn't hit. We ended up getting a ride to Dayton, Ohio, which is about 10 miles away from Xenia. And that's where my grandpa lived. And the woman took us to my grandpa's, and we stayed overnight with my grandpa. My dad, had no idea. There was no way to get in touch with him. There was obviously no phones or anything. So the next morning, we got as close as we could, because, like I said, all that, we probably couldn't even have got the car out if it would have worked out like we hoped, because everything was just blocked by debris. That's a word I learned. Destruction, debris, things like devastation, all these D words. So we got as close as we could, and we walked back to the house, and my dad was there, and he told us what had happened. So I didn't come back, obviously. So he went to go see what was going on. And in the meantime, the last name of the family was Ogle. So the dad's name was GB. So GB was home from work. He had walked in to find, his house. And my dad found him hysterical on the ground, crying hysterically. And my dad was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Are you okay? And he was like, it's my family, they're dead. And what he thought was all of the items that we had laid out on that blanket that we salvaged, he thought that was his family, because we covered it with a blanket, remember, when it rained? And my dad was like, no, they're not, they're fine. And he lifted off that blanket, and it's got, record players and a blender, and he was like, so that my dad cleared that up. So luckily, poor GB, didn't know where his family was, but he knew they were fine. And my dad and he walked around town and tried to find us and couldn't. So they both, GB got a ride because his house, there's no way he could even stay there. He got a ride into, they had relation in Dayton as well, like we did. So my dad waited at the house, and we started to kind of decide what we could save, what we couldn't save. We, like I said, we had to move out. So this was April 3rd. It was a Wednesday. So how many days of school do you think I missed? F5 tornado destroys most of my town, and it destroyed my school. I went to Warner Junior High, and so you can find pictures of my junior high. I put a video on there, and it was of my sister's elementary is on there. A girl, well, she's old like me now, but she talks about where her elementary school, and that's the elementary that my sister and I had went there too. You can see it's destroyed. Our high school, all these schools were destroyed. So how many days of school do you think I missed? We're missing, you're still having school, but we're not in school with all of this. We missed 4 days. Four days. That's it. I'll tell you, like how we're still having school now during this pandemic? School. We've got to stay in school. So, yes, we missed the Thursday and the Friday. That was obviously after it happened. Then we had spring break, was the next week. So we were already out of school anyway. And then we missed the Monday and the Tuesday. And what they did, our school was not rebuilt. They sent us to school in Fairborn, Ohio. That's near town. And we went to school after they were finished with school. So for the rest of my 8th grade year, I went to the high school in Fairborn, and we started at 4 o'clock, and we went to 9 o'clock. Yes, that is the truth. And book bags weren't invented. Can you imagine that? We didn't even have book bags. I just carried bunches of books. So they did make us like this canvas tote bag. We could carry books. All our books were destroyed. So people had to donate all our books. We had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They didn't have a cafeteria staff, so we just ate those sandwiches, and that's how we finished the school year. So the next year in school, things were still not rebuilt, but my junior high was not completely destroyed, and it was usable. So what happened that year is we went to school, the high school went to school there, and I was in 9th grade, which was not high school back in those days. But the high school went from 7 to 12, and we went from 1 to 6 or 7. So I went like from 1 to 6 or 7. I forget exactly how many. And then when I was in 10th grade, I went to high school, and our high school still was not built, so I had a really nice schedule. For 10th and 11th grade, I went to school from 7 to 12, so that wasn't bad. So we moved out from our house after the tornado, and we lived in an apartment. We had to catch our school bus to go to Fairborn at a random spot. My mom had to drive us there. My sister went to a different elementary school in Fairborn, but we did get on the same kind of bus. Our house was fixed, and we were one of the first people to move back in. All of the houses were slab. That's what we had. We'd have no basement. It was just a slab house, not even a crawl space. And they were all tile floors, so that was all of them were all scraped off by this time, and the debris was removed, and they were getting ready to rebuild the houses, and we would roller skate on their slab house. It was really kind of weird. So we could had a bus because nobody had cars, so they brought in a bus called the X Line for Xenia, and you could ride that for free. So we would ride all over Xenia and see what everything looked like. I do want to show you a picture. I don't know if I can bring this over here. This is of the boy I was telling you about. They made a book. So next year at school, I'll show you the book I have. And this is a picture of the bravest boy in 8th grade. I don't know if I can do it right. So he's right there. Can you see him? They're flying a kite. So if you can see, this is all the destruction on this street, which is, oh, what happened? There it goes. This is the destruction on the street, and that's where I lived. And the big tall kid is the Terry that was all by himself, and the shorter kid was another friend. He's my sister's age, so he was really good friends. So his name was Jeff, and they got a picture of him flying a kite when things were not yet rebuilt, but everybody was kind of trying to get back in their house. Isn't that cool? So 35 people did lose their lives. Like I said, I was very fortunate. I didn't know anybody that was hurt. So what this story is to tell you is that when you hear the tornado warning siren, a warning means you have to take shelter, either in a basement, an interior room that has no windows. A tornado watch, I want to talk about that in a minute. A tornado watch is when conditions are right. That means that there's cold air coming in, warm air coming in, and that will start to mix in the atmosphere. And that can start that funnel cloud. So if you have a tornado watch, will come first. That means conditions are right. And then if someone spots a tornado or they see it on the radar, then that means you need to take cover. It'll say Allen County has a tornado warning, and they'll give you like more information of where it was spotted. So I want you all to be safe. I miss you so much, and thank you for listening to my tornado story. And if you have any questions, just message me, and I'll let you look at the books next year. All right, bye everybody.